Coming into League of Legends from a CSGO background, following Brood War, following Quake, all the old FPS games, and then a bit of RTS. I'd never played a MOBA, I'd never played an arts game. I'd played a tiny little bit of Dota, but I wasn't at all from that world. And so as I got to know about League of Legends, the game, and understand the meta of how it works and how changes are like repeatedly applied by the developer, which alter the game, sometimes on a month-by-month basis, there wasn't the same stability that there'd been in games like Quake, Brood War, Counter-Strike. It's been the same game, essentially unpatched, like sort of almost the same qualities and variables to different aspects for like sometimes 10 years. And then the meta developed around how players played within it and what counters they found to each other, new ways of exploiting something. So coming into this world where things changed, one of the things very early on that I found quite confusing was that as I was learning about who the best players were and watching them and see how effective they are, I found that there was immediately kind of a disparity between the different roles. Now, there was naturally a disparity in as much as the supportive roles like jungle and support. It's going to be very difficult for a player to shine in the same way as the traditional carry roles, top, mid, and AD carry could shine. But as I've studied the history of the game and then later on saw the game develop through Season 3, into Season 4, now Season 5, I saw this pattern developing which no one seems to address, and which is not only not addressed but is almost ignored as though it's not relevant, and yet it actually is a very important underpinning of the legitimacy of league analysis in terms of historical context of who is the best player, who is the best player on a team, which roles have favour at the moment. And what I basically found was, I don't think this is even really that debatable, that there is a huge mid-lane bias in League of Legends. And it really is the esports side of League of Legends. Because on solo queue, listen, if you get to a low enough rank, any role can carry, any role can dominate the game. A good enough player there can affect the game. You can use almost any champion. But in the top level, where you're trying to use optimal things, the most efficient things, trying to use strategies which facilitate those being even more powerful, you can find that there's this huge mid lane bias in terms of strength of the mid lane as a traditional carry role, strength of mid lane relative to the other roles in the game, and strength of mid lane in terms of the impact you can have on an overall game, contrasted against, crucially, the other carry roles, the top lane role and the AD carry. So first and foremost, the mid lane has been a carry role up to as hard a carry as you can be every single competitive era of League of Legends. Season 1, Season 2, Season 3, Season 4, Season 5 now. In every single meta, it has been either the hardest carry role or tied for hardest carry role or one or top two. In general, biggest carry role in every era, which doesn't follow with the idea that these are other top can carry, AD carry can carry. All these positions have had different times. So almost every single, and as a result of it being the main carry, almost every single truly great team, obviously that's a very debatable topic, but I'm going to define it myself, has had a world-class mid laner, which suggests that you even have to have a world-class mid laner to be a truly great team. I think that's a pretty obvious correlation you can make there. So let's think of some of the ones that were truly great teams that had a world-class mid laner. Azubu Blaze, won OGN, MLG Summer, won a later AMLG, got to an OGN final, Ambition, Moscow 5, Alex Ich, best team in the world, dominated Europe, dominated the West, CLGU, incredibly consistent, tons of top 4s, tons of top 2s, one of the best mid laners, at one point the best player in the world, Froggen, Fnatic, we've got Expeke, tons of international accomplishments, repeatedly matched up very, very well, always a mid-centric team, Taipei Assassins, winners of Season 2 with an incredible run of form, top 4 at IPL, I think it was third place actually at IPL 5, Toys when he was in his prime, the Oriana King, World Elite, something crazy like 33 straight series, won over like a 5-month span, incredible domestic dominance, won IPL 5, huge international tournament, one of the best teams of all time, Messiah, EDG, one of the arguably the most dominant Chinese team domestically ever, a whole year of absolute dominance, reaching something like 10 finals of tournaments, winning 8 of them, winning both of the domestic big leagues, just an absolutely incredible team. Now, not a super godlike mid, but a world-class level mid. Like, people just didn't acknowledge him at the time. He was the second best player on that team. He's a very good player. Great utility mid laner. Samsung Blue. Got Dade, amazing team fighter, one of the most decorated players in League of Legends history. Took this particular lineup to 2 straight finals, almost won 2 titles, did win another title, MVP in that performance, amazing performance, one of the best teams, best team of the year, 2014. Samsung White, the team that won Worlds, an incredible, maybe the most dominant team ever there. Pawn, admittedly, he's around with the level of people like Messiah here. Not like the best player, but a really, really top level player. Very, very skilled. And the rest of the team's amazing there. But okay, even then, still won with a great mid laner. MVP Ozone. Dade in his first incarnation at MVP. Rinsing out ambition on Zed, winning the game for his team, turning them from an imp-led team into a team that had other threats, and he was the MVP in that final. They win OGN. SK Telecom, the most dominant team in history. Faker, the best player ever, anchors every single lineup they've had, and was the best player at every big game practically. Even when you go beyond that, KT Bullets. Okay, this is another one that's a bit more debatable, but Ryu, for a period of time, I won't say for the whole time of KT Bullets, but let's say for summer through to about, summer through to the winter season, were very, very good mid laner. Top 5 in the world, certainly. Maybe top 3. Very polished, very round. Had some skill disparity compared to people like Cool and Faker, but a very polished, very brilliant way to play the game and work with it. Now, one of the rare exceptions, it's hard to name truly great teams that didn't have one of the world-class mids. Like, I always thought Rapid Star wasn't quite that good, so Frost is one. Azuba Frost is an amazing team. Made something like 4 or 5, I think it was 4 straight finals, 5 out of their first 6 tournaments, they made the final, won OGN, made Worlds final. Rapid Star was a good mid laner, but he wasn't on the level. Like, he wouldn't have even been top 5 or top 6 for me at the position in the world. He'd be lower end of top 10. Cloud9. Now this one's harder. Obviously, they weren't like an internationally world-class team. They were never better than about... It's hard. They'd be on the low end of the top 10 at any point in time at best. And that's when Korea was very strong, so maybe not even top 10. But okay, amazing domestic team. They actually, mid lane was reasonably weak compared to the other carry roles they had, except for very briefly early on. So it's very rare you could name exceptions where there was a truly great team that had a not truly great mid laner. So it kind of follows. Now let's talk about why, because let's look at some of the other lanes and what happened to them. Let's look at the other roles in the game. Then we'll kind of ask why it might be. So top lane is the first and the most abused position in terms of what has happened to it relative to how mid lane's always been relevant, always been strong, always had a way to carry, always had a way to show what an incredible player you are and have an insane impact on the game if you're the best player at that position. Top lane has been repeatedly ruined for true carries for literally half of the LCS era. So LCS began in early 2013 and continues now to 2015. So roughly, I mean, at the moment it's almost 3 seasons worth. So let's say 3 years, but it's not quite 3 years. So let's say 2.5 years, okay, whatever, 2.5 years. Well, we had the era of the tank top meta. And the tank tops, thanks to the defensive masteries, thanks to champions like Dr. Mundo, meant that the whole fucking game was Shyvana, Trundle, Dr. Mundo. This was the shit being played again and again and again. And because every other team was doing it and going super tanky from top, if you didn't do it, you could occasionally get away with it, but you play it was a massive gamble. So in general, you should go tank top as well. And those tank tops, you couldn't carry the game in a traditional sense. You had to facilitate others carrying or neutralize an opponent, and then your carries win. It was all about zoning. It was all about soaking up damage. It wasn't about being able to traditionally carry, to win lane, to win game, to have this massive impact, to get lots of kills. It wasn't that. And so people who were the true carries of the era, the Saves, Flames, etc., they still were incredible players. But at their peaks in this era, they could never have the impact that a Faker or an Imp or a Deft or some of these guys could at the same time from other traditional carry positions. Now, I'm sorry, this is a problem, top lane especially, which highlights this mid lane bias. Because I'm afraid I don't buy this idea that Flame, Shy, Soaz, some of the best top laners ever woke up one day when all this tank top meta came and just all sucked. They just didn't know how to play the position. They couldn't carry properly, and they just were all not as good anymore. Sorry, that doesn't work. And as a result, this is one of the only traditional carry roles ever in the history of the game where guys who weren't superstar players at that position, because they were doing better, because they just played that utility style that wasn't about carrying, then became more successful because their teams had the carries at the other roles and they won the titles, that their accomplishments made people, including some experts, rank them as the stars of the position and take the other stars who hadn't actually fallen off. They just couldn't, they had no tools to carry with. They were now put above them as these aren't just more accomplished players at this position, they're better players. Like Looper is better than Flame. And you know what? Impact, he's better than Shy. And Zaxxas in Europe, oh, well, he's better than Soaz. No, these are ridiculous statements. And the fact that even experts got kind of tricked by that, I get it that they were within the moment and they needed the perspective of now to come out of it and see the problems there. I mean, it's rare that experts of the game will get fooled like that, but they did. And it's kind of sad, actually. What about the jungle? So jungle traditionally was originally a total utility role, but then at one point in time, late season 2, early season 3, we had the Insec bringing back the carry style of the St. Vicious, but even more so in Korea. We had the carry junglers, then that leveled off a bit. Then we had the era of early spring. People were able to have these warrior champions. We had the Nidalees going on with Diamond Procs, Spirit, Cacao. They were carrying again. Move, Rush. It was fucking sick to watch. In came Cinderhulk. That knocked that on the head. Same as what happened to top lane. You had to play the Cinderhulk junglers. It's going to be very risky if you didn't. You had to be world class to get away with it. And in general, you're just better off playing them. Now the tank role had to be there as well. And now suddenly those players like Rush became less impactful in that particular sense. It's harder for Spirit to single hard carry in that particular role. Diamond Procs fell off. Became too powerful. Same way that the tank top meta had for tanks. Now, I won't do support because it's never going to be a carry role totally. But okay, it was tanky at one point in time, I guess. AD carry. So we all remember Season 2, super strong, rivaling mid. In some senses, maybe even stronger at times. Because if you did get to like 30 minutes or more, now you could have more of an impact than the mid laners if you could stay alive and you had the right peel. But Season 3, for a lot of Season 3, way worse due to nerfs. Season 4, it's not even nerfs now, it's the fucking tank top era, means that you're doing attack damage, you're trying to do with autos, your only option is attack damage, and you're playing versus people who have got super buffed defensive masteries, are building super tanky, aren't losing lane because they can't be killed in lane, and they're just going to zone the fuck out of you, throw pillets, do slows on you, fuck with you the whole time, and then they're buying like Thorn Mail as well. It became a nightmare, it became rock hard for these guys to carry. Now it wasn't quite as bad as it was for tops, the carry tops, but even so, it became way more strenuous for some of these AD carries to carry in a way that never happened at mid lane. So okay, what's one of the reasons as to why there's a mid lane bias? Because for some weird reason, a lot of these changes that I'm discussing tend to revolve around tankiness. So they tend to be around buffs to defensive masteries or armor, or bonus health or additional health items in terms of making them cheaper or buffing them or changing the masteries, changing the champion's strengths, making a scaling better. All these things mean that it's people who do attack damage, like AD carries, who are getting fucked. These are the guys that can't survive in this world, or it's going to be much harder for them. Meanwhile, most mid laners to this day still are AP champions. Now AP, what's the counter to AP? Well, we all know it's magic resistance, right? Magic resistance has never had the same kind of buffs, the same kind of widespread. There's never been a thing where everyone gets super magically tanky, which that always happened, and that fucks over all the mid laners, and that these great AP champion mid laner champions can't play APs anymore. They have to only play AD carries. They can't play any of these. That doesn't happen. There's been times when it's been 50-50, some ADs, so you've got your Zeds and your Talons and whatnot, but you also have the APs there always. It's never quite happened. Magic resistance has never been fucked with and overpowered and underpriced rather, made too efficient in the same way as armor and bonus health has in that sense. So that's one reason as to why there's a bias there. Now the big problem with this, the reason why it's an issue, why I bring it up, is because, like I said about the whole thing about where in top laners you had all these players who at the time weren't stars. Like Impact was good, but he wasn't as good as Flame. But Flame could not have the same impact. Well, not that he couldn't have the same impact. He couldn't be as successful as Impact because Flame was the star of his team, the best player, whereas Impact was like the third or fourth best player. So he didn't have to even do as much, and he could succeed and win. He had other people who could carry the game for him. He could just do his job. Now the problem is, like I said, those people then being mistakenly thought of as the best, as the stars. The problem with this is that in a sane world where we have competitive integrity and we're not going too far one way or the other, buffing and nerfing stuff, it should be the case that when you sit down and you make a list of the greatest players of all time, The truly great players at the 3 traditional carry roles, top, mid and AD carry, there should be a kind of parity between what they were able to do, etc. They should be on a similar footing in terms of like how much opportunity they had to carry, how the meta went in their careers, what the relative strength of other things was that could neutralize them. And the reason why I say it has to be an even footing, it's not that they all have to have the same accomplishments, that's ridiculous, but that once we have this more even footing, their play will then show us who the greatest are. We'll then see that this mid was great and this AD carry was just, and this top was great. If you go and look at my top 20 players of all time in League of Legends, I purposely make it so that, yeah, I've got a pretty even distribution of mid, AD carry, jungle. I've tried to get them all in because I understand a point that I'm going to now make, which is that in a sane world, I take it in context when some of those tops couldn't carry the same way. If even in that world they struggled through and they still did incredible things, I put it contextually so that they don't have to now win the tournament in the same way that the mid laner does necessarily. He's got an easier task to a degree. He can have more impact. So I try to even it all out, and then as a result, I've managed to find the best at these different roles because they're all-time great players. I don't believe that top lane just hasn't had that many great players over the last few years. I'm sorry, I don't believe that. That's ridiculous. The position has been hampered where you can't. What, you're telling me no great player goes and tries to play top lane and couldn't do it in the same degree that mid lane could? Meanwhile, not even so great mid lane players are having an insane impact on the game. No, I'm sorry, that doesn't add up. There's not a year born where no player in the NBA just decides to be a point guard and all the point guards are just shit. That doesn't happen. Now, the reason I say the NBA is the NBA is a great example. The NBA, we have these 5 positions, and in theory, every single position can carry, can be the superstar of his team, can be the star of his team, can be a superstar of the league, can be one of the greatest players ever. And when you go down the greatest players ever, you've got all the positions represented. So, okay, centre traditionally you'd think would be the strongest. Centre's not even that strong anymore. Now, you still have a couple of great centres coming through now and then, but in past eras, great centres all the time. Small forward, again, another role that usually isn't such a great one, but now you've got LeBron James, the best player in the whole world as a small forward right now. Shooting guard traditionally used to just be the guy who found the open shot, used his great accuracy, made it. Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, some of the best players ever. You go through all the positions, they're all represented. There's never an undue massive bias. The meta of how the teams choose to use them is different, but the game itself doesn't have this ridiculous bias that hinders a player from carrying and being the star, whereas that's what's happened in League of Legends. So to me, it's not talked about much, but that is a bias. That isn't like the dirty secret of the League of Legends esports is essentially that if you were an AD carry in Season 3, early Season 4, or you were a top laner in early Season 4, it wasn't possible for you to achieve the same excellence as a godlike mid laner would in nearly every era. And yet you would then be ranked as not being as good as those godlike mid laners because you hadn't accomplished as much. So the real dirty secret was there's a reason why the mid lane was all that way, was biased in that sense. Now, I'm not a total expert about the mechanics of the league, so I'd love it if people can figure out more reasons why, or other aspects, or if they can find some other reasoning as to why they think it was this way, and maybe it has to be this way, maybe there's some meta context that I'm not understanding. Be great to know. Anyway, this video was sponsored by Alpha Draft, where you can play fantasy League of Legends, such as League of Legends and others. And they also sponsor and produce a show I do called By the Numbers with Monte Cristo. I'll put the latest episode in the description box below. Thanks to Alpha Draft.